We live in the age of the billionaire. Every other week, it feels like there's a new headline about Elon Musk buying a social media platform for the GDP of a small country, or Jeff Bezos building a clock inside a mountain that will tick for 10,000 years. We look at these numbers, 200 billion, 250 billion, and our brains short-circuit. It is an amount of money that is impossible to visualize. But here is the humble truth. In the grand scope of history, these guys are actually kind of middle class. If you adjust for inflation and, more importantly, economic power, the richest people of the past didn't just have a lot of money. They personally owned entire countries. They could crash the global economy just by going on vacation. They held wealth that makes the modern tech giants look like they're running a lemonade stand. To find the true kings of capitalism, we have to look back in time. To understand true wealth, we have to start in America's Gilded Age. This was a time before income tax, before antitrust laws, and before anyone told you that you couldn't own 90% of an entire industry. Enter John D. Rockefeller. If you drive a car with a combustion engine today, you are essentially paying royalties to this man's ghost. Rockefeller founded Standard Oil in 1870, and by the early 1880s, he controlled 90% of all the oil in the United States. To put that in perspective, imagine if one guy owned Exxon, Chevron, Shell, and BP, and then also owned the gas station you fill up at, the pipeline that brought the gas there, and the train that carried the oil. That was Rockefeller. At his peak, Rockefeller's wealth was valued at about 1.5 to 2 of the entire American economy. If you owned 2 of the U.S. GDP today, you wouldn't be worth 200 billion like Elon Musk. You would be worth roughly 400 to 500 billion. But the funny part is that the richest man in modern history was famously, painfully cheap. Rockefeller was obsessed with frugality. He would wear his suits until they were shiny with age, and he saved the paper and string from packages that arrived at his house. There is a famous story where he was touring one of his plants and saw a machine sealing oil cans with 40 drops of solder. He asked the foreman to try 38 drops. The cans leaked. Then he asked for 39. They sealed perfectly. That one drop of solder saved the company $2,500 the first year, and over time, it saved hundreds of thousands. That is how you become the richest man in America, by counting the drops of glue. Right on Rockefeller's heels was Andrew Carnegie. While Rockefeller had oil, Carnegie had steel. He sold his company to J.P. Morgan in 1901 for $480 million. In today's money, that transaction alone, adjusted for the relative share of the economy, would be over $370 billion. But Carnegie had a very different philosophy. He famously said, "The man who dies thus rich dies disgraced." He spent the last part of his life desperately trying to give it all away. If you have ever been to a public library in a small town, check the plaque near the door. Chances are, Andrew Carnegie built it. He built over 2,500 libraries. Both men eventually gave away massive fortunes, but even they can't compete with the old world money found in Europe. Let's step back to the 16th century. Before there was Wall Street, there was Augsburg, Germany. And in Augsburg, there was a man named Jacob Fugger. They literally called him Jacob the Rich. That was his actual nickname. You have probably never heard of him, but Jacob Fugger makes modern venture capitalists look like amateurs. He didn't just invest in companies, he invested in sovereigns. He had a net worth estimated at 400 billion in today's dollars, which was about 2 of the GDP of Europe. But his power was greater than his bank account because he financed the Holy Roman Emperor and bankrolled the Pope. Here is a true story about Fugger's influence. When King Charles I of Spain wanted to become the Holy Roman Emperor, he needed to bribe basically everyone, but he didn't have the cash. Fugger wrote the check. Later, when Charles, now the most powerful man on earth, was slow to pay him back, Fugger wrote him a letter. He essentially said, "Remember, without me, you wouldn't be emperor. Pay up." Imagine sending a collection notice to the guy who commands the armies of Europe. That is a level of confidence that only comes with forget-you money. Fugger also left a legacy you can still visit. He built the Fuggerei, the world's oldest social housing complex for the poor of Augsburg. The rent was set at 1 Rhenish guilder per year in 1521. The trust he set up is still running, and the rent has never been raised. Today, if you live there, you pay 88 cents a year. The only catch is that you have to pray 3 times a day for the soul of Jacob Fugger. Now we are leaving the realm of businessmen and entering the realm of conquerors. When you are an emperor, the line between public funds and private bank account gets a little blurry. No one blurred that line better than Augustus Caesar. Augustus was the first Roman emperor, controlling an empire that accounted for 25 to 30% of the world's economic output. Economists have looked at his personal holdings, and the number they came up with is terrifying. Augustus Caesar's personal net worth is estimated at 4.6 trillion. How do you get to 4.6 trillion? You don't do it by selling oil or software. You do it by personally owning a country. When Rome conquered Egypt, Augustus didn't make it a province of Rome. He made it the personal property of the emperor. Imagine if the President of the United States personally owned California, not the government, but the person. All the tax revenue, all the grain, and all the trade from the richest region in the Mediterranean flowed directly into Augustus's pocket. He was so rich that he essentially bailed out the Roman Empire with his own debit card. In his memoir, The Residential Gesti, he lists all the times he paid for the grain dole, built temples, or paid the soldiers' pensions out of his own money. He famously said, "I found Rome a city of brick and left it a city of marble." He wasn't speaking metaphorically, he paid for the marble. But even Augustus, with his trillions and his personal ownership of the pyramids, might have to bow down to our number 1 spot. We have arrived at the gold standard. In the year 1324, a caravan appeared on the horizon of the Sahara Desert, approaching Cairo. It wasn't just a caravan, it was a moving city. There were 60,000 people, 12,000 servants wearing fine silks, and 80 camels, each carrying 300 pounds of gold dust. At the head of this procession was Mansa Musa, the ruler of the Mali Empire. Mansa Musa is often cited as the richest person to ever live. His wealth is usually estimated at 400 billion, but many historians argue that this number is basically made up because his wealth was described as incomprehensible. There was no number to put on it. He was the gold market. Musa was a devout Muslim, and he was making his pilgrimage, the Hajj, to Mecca. But he didn't just travel, he spent. When he stopped in Cairo, he gave away so much gold to the poor, to the mosques, to the officials, that he single-handedly crashed the economy of the Middle East. Think about that for a second. Usually, when a billionaire spends money, it stimulates the economy. Mansa Musa spent so much that he caused hyperinflation. He flooded the market with gold, which made gold less valuable. It took Cairo 12 years to recover from his visit. He is the only person in history to destabilize the price of gold across 3 continents just by going on a vacation. There's a story that on his way back, he realized the economic damage he had caused. So, in a move that is practically the ultimate flex, he tried to fix it by borrowing all the gold back at high interest rates, just to take it out of circulation and stabilize the economy. He broke the economy with generosity, and fixed it with debt. His wealth came from geography. The Mali Empire sat on top of the world's largest gold mines at a time when the entire world was hungry for gold, and he also controlled the salt trade. So, who wins? If you want pure purchasing power and political control, Augustus Caesar's 4.6 trillion probably takes the crown. If you want resources and sheer I can crash the economy influence, it's Mansa Musa. But there is a tragic irony to all this wealth. What happened to these fortunes? Mansa Musa's empire collapsed shortly after his death due to infighting and European colonization. Augustus's personal wealth became the state's wealth, eventually squandered by emperors like Nero and Caligula. Rockefeller's monopoly was broken up by the government. It turns out, accumulating 4 trillion is the easy part. Keeping it is the hard part. The richest men in history built monuments, libraries, and empires. But in the end, they all learned the same lesson: you can't take it with you. Although, honestly, I wouldn't mind having that 88-cent rent in Augsburg.